Hey, Suzy. Thank you so much for being here with me today. It's really good to see you. And I so appreciate you making some time to talk with me about your journey with rewiring and make that available for other people to get inspiration from and learn from. So thank you for being here with me.
Thanks, Connie.
Yeah. Um, all right, well, let's dive right into it. So, what symptoms and diagnoses did you come to brain retraining with? Let's start there. I think that's a good starting place.
Okay, well, I had a few. I'll just read down my list. So, first of all, I was incredibly reactive to pretty much everything in life. Um, so, there was Lyme, chronic fatigue, multiple chemical sensitivity, reaction to sounds, light, smell, food, and people, incontinence, prediabetes, a heavy viral load. I had genetic testing that showed many abnormalities, especially the detox pathways. um, Depression, ringing in my ears, pain, digestive problems. My appetite was completely dysregulated, anxiety, sleeping too much, brain fog, confusion, SIBO, sinusitis, thyroid issues, leg cramps, heart palpitations, and just a kind of all the time feeling like I had the flu. I would wake up in the morning and either feel like I had the flu or that I had a hangover. So that's all.
Yeah. That's it. Just a few things, no biggie. Um, and I want to let people in on kind of the little smile that we exchanged when you talked about the detox pathways, because I know you had shared this list with me through an email, and what you put after the detox pathways was blah, 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 blah. And I so appreciated you kind of stepping away from the story behind that so many of us get pulled into when we're told that our detox pathways aren't working, that somehow we can't change it, that we're stuck with it, that that's our genetic curse, so to speak. And I love how you have just turned that into blah, 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 blah. I'm not buying into it. I'm not getting stuck in that. So I just want to share with other people because I'm sure they noticed we exchanged a little bit of a smile there and we're thinking, what's so funny about detox pathways not working? That's I so appreciate how you turned that into something that didn't have power and charge to it and instead just blah blah blah. So I just wanted to touch on that. Um, so what did
Well,
life look like for
I
you before? Go ahead. Yeah.
also laugh about that because then so once I don't know if it's this way for everybody, but once I got that genetic testing done, then it was like, that's it. You know, you're so toxic that you're sick, and we're going to do everything we can to help you detox. So
Yeah.
that's what the blah blah is.
I don't think that's just you because I think for so many of us, myself included, before coming to brain retraining, you're so focused on detoxing and doing everything under the sun to detox and not really getting anywhere and not seeing any changes with it. So I don't think you are alone in that whatsoever, not even close. um, so that's a pretty long list of symptoms and diagnoses. What did life look like for you before brain retraining when you were dealing with all those things?
Um, so when everything when it was like at the height, mostly I laid in bed, and um, I still was able to go to work, but my coincidentally my work was getting smaller and smaller. Well, I don't think it was a coincidence. I think it was because I wasn't really functioning very well. So I would go to work and I would go to the grocery store, and but a lot I would just lay in bed or lay on the couch. And when I didn't have anything to do, sometimes I would spend up to 3 full days just sleeping, pretty much sleeping.
Yeah. So it really speaks to how small life can get when you're dealing with that many symptoms and stuck in survival mode. Life gets pretty small pretty quickly. Yeah, which that I can relate to that whole thing of I work a few hours, try and survive that, and then crash on the couch for several days to recover. And then I try and get enough energy up to just go get some food so that I can get through the next week. So I can so relate to that. And describing that as not fun is certainly an understatement of all understatements. So, what does life look like for you now after brain retraining, after working on your limbic system and your nervous system? What does life look like for you now?
Um, well, it's pretty darn good. And I, I'm building my business back up, and I I have lots of energy. So I don't, I stay up all day. A lot of days I don't lay down at all. I just get up and go through my day, and um, yeah, and I'm not depressed. I don't have any of those diagnoses that list. There's still a couple things I'm working on, but most of them are just gone.
Suzy, that's amazing. Congrats.
Yeah.
So big to one, just have the energy to be up the entire day, but to also be up the entire day and be productive and have enough capacity and energy to actually put it into building a business. That just speaks to a whole different level of regulation and your system being in a place where it's not in survival mode and just trying to hold on to every little bit of energy that you have. So happy to hear that you're at that place where you can actually put energy back into the things that matter and that you want to put energy into. That's amazing. So how long did it take you to heal? How long did it take you to get to the point where you're at now? What was that journey like for you?
Um, so it took, like, I wrote down something about that. Um, oh shoot, I wrote too much. Well, it took basically 5 years. And what I wrote down that I had never thought about before, but so I still felt pretty bad for 4 of those 5 years. And then there was the last year, there was something just shifted, and then things really snowballed. So I was getting better all during the 4 years,
Okay.
but it was super slow, and it was super frustrating, and um, I was, especially the first couple of years, I was really sad and angry.
Mhm.
And I actually think that the retraining, it didn't make me feel that way, but it gave me the clarity to be able to feel that way, because the first 2 years were better than the 10 years before. But I was really sad and angry that this is what my life had come to. That, like, the highlight of my day was a future visualization. It's like, um, so I had to really grapple with that and come to, okay, well, that's the reality, and just that I didn't really have an option. I had to just keep going with this, because it was the only thing that had made even a teeny bit of difference.
Mhm. Yeah. So there's a couple things that you mentioned that I think are worth touching on and talking about a little bit. One is that it took 5 years and you didn't, yes, you were getting better for each of those years, but there wasn't that major shift until that last year. I just want to highlight that for a moment because I think there's so many people that need to hear that. Um, One of the things that I just, of course, hear a lot about is, okay, I thought I was going to heal in 6 months, and it didn't take 6 months. And so, why aren't I healed yet? And what I know on my side of things is that it typically takes longer to heal. Most of us are healing from decades of patterns that don't serve us, decades of dysregulation, and it often does take several years to do that. So I really appreciate you helping to normalize that that's okay and that you still can heal, even if it's been, say, 3 years and you haven't had that huge, massive shift. That doesn't mean that you're not still steadily improving and moving towards that big shift. Um, and I also want to just acknowledge that it must have been pretty hard to keep the faith during those 4 years and keep going. Was there were the temptation to kind of say, forget this and I'm tired of this and I don't want to do this, especially with the sadness and the anger there? I would imagine that was a thing.
Every day. It was like that every day. The more time that goes on now that I feel better, and there's just so much to reflect on those 5 years of doing that. And I kind of don't know how I did it. Because if I wouldn't have been able to predict that I would keep going. But the brain retraining, on the other hand, is so gentle. It's such a gentle thing that, um, it can go and listen to some nature sounds. That's one of the things I did. Um, so
And kudos to you for continuing on. Because again, I think what you're speaking to is validating for so many people of having that daily experience of I want to quit, I want to quit, and somehow finding within yourself to go, okay, nope, I'm going to do it today. Not going to worry about tomorrow, but I'll do it today, and tomorrow I'll get to it tomorrow. So I appreciate you speaking honestly and openly about that because I think a lot of people are in the same boat and that's not talked about too much. Um, Go ahead. Were you going to say something else?
just that it just came to my mind that, I read the DNRS manual, and I took a lot of group classes and stuff. And something in me just either really heard, or I just chose to really believe and take it to heart a lot of the things that were said. Um, uh, that it takes it takes a while. I can't remember what just crossed my mind with that, but I don't know. There's so many things. This is like a 5-hour conversation.
For sure. Trying to summarize 5 years of rewiring and healing in a short conversation is it's an undoable thing for anybody for sure. Um, well, one thing, there's two other things that you touched on that I want to mention. One, you talked about just listening to nature sounds. So was that something that you did to just kind of settle into that, helping to calm your nervous system and just listening to nature sounds?
Yeah, because especially well, in terms of rounds and being really good at rounds, which have learned later that I did fine. But that it was hard. It's hard to do rounds, and it's hard to visualize, and it's difficult to come up with a future visualization sometimes when it doesn't seem like there's a future, or a past visualization when all you can think of is like all the bad things that happen. But I have some really strong memories and happy places, and one of them is at the ocean, and the other one is in the mountains. So um, I would just put on an ocean sound. I live in California, and I found an ocean. Um, it was actually a video, but it was from a beach that I used to go to, and it was like 3 hours long. And so I would just put that on, or I would put on mountain streams with birds, and it was to me as good as doing a visualization. Plus, it lasted a long time, so it would really lift my mood to do that.
Yeah, I think that's such a great idea, and it's a lovely way to calm the nervous system in a passive way. where you're not feeling like I'm really working at this, and instead I'm just listening to the sounds of the ocean in the background. And certainly you can pair a visualization with it, but you can also just have it playing in the background. So really smart thing to do for sure. Um, the other thing that I wanted to touch on is you mentioned the sadness and the anger about kind of what life had turned into, and that the highlight of my day is now doing a future visualization, and it totally valid that there's sadness and anger tied to that. And I just really appreciate you being honest about that, because I think that's something that many of us struggle with, is feeling like I shouldn't have any feelings about how small life has gotten, or I shouldn't have any emotional response to all I do is go from my bed to the couch and nothing else. So I just appreciate you speaking honestly about that. Is there anything else that you want to share about that? And no worries if not, but I wanted to mention that because it's, I think, such a common experience and everyone just kind of glosses over it a little bit.
Um, well, I think part of the healing of the whole thing is it's untangling, the cross wires, but it's untangling all those feelings, and like the feelings of shame, like what did I do? What did I do to for things to end up like this? And I can think back on things I did that led to, you know, but I didn't. I know now that I didn't do anything like unusually wrong or bad or something. And yeah, just that kind of stuff, that because it's a relief to find something to do to help yourself. But at the same time, my life got, even for a while, or quite a while, it got even more isolated,
Mm.
um, due to a lot of things, but just can't talk about it with your friends, better not to talk about it with the friends. And they didn't understand anyway. So it's better for them too. Yeah, so just sitting with the shame and the isolation and feeling sad and angry, and then, okay, well, this is what I have.
And what I hear is you moving through that and getting to a place of acceptance and saying, this is where I'm at. And how do I move forward from where I'm at, from a place of acceptance, instead of fighting it or trying to come up with a different alternative that isn't possible, that I don't have any control over, which is hard to do, no doubt. And I think you also touched on something about feeling like you are responsible, which I think is such a big piece of it for so many of us. We feel shame and like we've done something wrong or we've caused this. So again, I just appreciate you speaking about that. You mentioned in an email to me that along with the sadness and the anger, really starting to feel like a victim at times too, and kind of a victim of your circumstances. Anything that you want to share about that, or what was helpful with that or not helpful with that?
Well, I just think that I don't think that fighting, feeling like a victim or thinking I was a victim, helped. It was more just shifting away from that to, okay, what happened and what's happening now? How can I understand? And I also wonder if, when those thoughts come, if those are limbic talking. Because one of the things I spent a lot of time, like every day this would happen, sometimes multiple times, just doing that thing. This is one of the things I really believed, that just doing that thing of saying to my limbic system, or, just imagining it, okay, I see you over there, or I hear you, and now why don't you have a seat and have a cup of tea, because I'm busy over here doing this other thing. And it might not even be that I was busy doing a round or anything. it was just like, why not say it that way instead of shut up? And so when things like feeling like a victim, feeling victimized, feeling just like, yeah, like things were stacked against me, and all that, it's like I just cannot spend a bunch of time doing that. That's like reading the news.
It's a great way to put it too, because it doesn't serve us. It's such a common pattern that comes up, but getting pulled into it and staying in it doesn't serve us at all. And I love how you talked about, kind of you're telling your limbic system, hey, I'm going to be over here doing this. Can you just have a cup of tea and hang out over there? That for me is just such a gentle way to kind of say, hey, no, thank you, brain, instead of don't do that, you shouldn't do that, because especially if we're feeling a bit beat up by life and feeling like a victim, then yelling at our brain can even feed into that even more. So I just love the softness of it, and just, hey, you can do that. Just please go do that over here, because I'm going to be over here doing something else. um, so one of the other things I wanted to ask you is, were there other modalities that you did alongside brain retraining that you found helpful?
Um, oh yeah. Okay. So the first thing I did, and I did it like almost right away, is I quit going to therapy, which was like uh, a huge thing for me, because I had been going to therapy for a long time because there was something wrong with me. That's kind of the way it played. And that to me is such a limbic thing. And when I read the part about, well, going to therapy can um, keep stimulating the limbic system, because every time if you're talking about your childhood trauma, or any kind of trauma thing that's gone on, that's one of the things I really believed from the material, is like the brain hears every single thing. So if I knew that I felt when the traumatic things would be brought up, I didn't feel good. And so that's the first thing I did, and it was that was a huge relief. Just like that was the first thing, and gave me the space to just shut that out for a while. Okay, so I did that, and then I did a lot of the work I do personally. My profession is I work with a lot of really slow movement, like somatic type movement, and I was able to just continue that on. So I didn't ever have to stop doing that movement. I couldn't really walk around the block, but I could lay on the floor and breathe and do slow movements. And that was like a saving grace, to be able to do some movement.
Yeah. So let me jump in and comment before a couple of thoughts. So I just want to circle back to the therapy thing, because one, for me, therapy often is a timing thing, and it's a timing question. And a lot of times what happens is people have been doing, like you were saying, a lot of therapy and talking about trauma again and again and again, and not feeling like they're getting anywhere, and also feeling worse after they're doing it, but not feeling like it helps to resolve it. And for me, it's such a timing issue, because starting to talk about trauma, if you don't have the tools in place to be able to support yourself through that, is kind of the cart before the horse. And so, I just want to be clear that nothing wrong with doing therapy if and when the time is right. But certainly so many people, same boat that you were in, where it's like, okay, I've been working on this for so many years, and I've really been showing up, and I've really been honest and open with the therapist, and nothing's shifting. and it's not helping. So kudos to you for noticing that, okay, this isn't helping. And all I'm doing is actually just feeding into the trauma loops and reinforcing what I actually need to shift my brain out of. So I just wanted to touch on that. The other thing I wanted to comment on was you talking about the slow somatic movement. Um, yeah, absolutely. So I'm happy that that's one of the things that's getting talked about more in kind of the rewiring world, not just the brain, but also more somatic stuff. And the slow part to me is so key because slow feels safe for our nervous system. Slow feels soothing for our nervous system. So how lovely that you had that background and could incorporate that in with brain retraining. That's fantastic. Really great. Okay, sorry, I jumped in. Go ahead.
And the other part about the therapy is that in the beginning, the therapy was useful. I think if I came to brain retraining, had a significant limbic system impairment, and started trying to figure out the background, and it might go back, and a person might need to do some therapy to help them get through some of the initial part. So yeah, I wasn't really trying to say therapy was bad. It was just it was just time for me to go.
Yeah. No, I didn't. Nothing you said came across that way. I just wanted to kind of put that in just to make sure that people weren't thinking, oh gosh, I better not do
Oh
therapy.
yeah.
Because what I see is just what you touched into is that oftentimes the limbic system needs to be addressed first. And then it might be time for something like therapy or something else. But oftentimes, when people have tried those things before calming their limbic system, is when they don't see the results. But then once the limbic system is calm, all of a sudden they go, oh, this has a whole different impact. And I can actually feel the benefit in this now that I calmed my limbic system down. So, no, nothing you said came across that way. I just wanted to put that in just to make sure that people weren't hearing it in a different way. So, anyway, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so another thing that I did, and I wish that I could have kept doing this, but there, you know what a float is? When you get in one of those flotation
Yeah.
um, in the Epsom salt, and there was a place here where I live, and for the first 4 or 5 months, I had been doing it before, and for the first 4 or 5 months of my retraining, I was able to do that, but then they had to close because then it was COVID. So that I just think that would have been really helpful because it was already helping me before I found the brain retraining stuff.
Interesting. Okay.
Obviously, the group classes, I did a
Mhm.
lot of group classes with the DNRS and then a bunch with you, a couple of years with you, I think. And that was super helpful. Foot massages really calm the nervous system.
Mhm.
At least they do mine, but I think they do a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then I also started doing uh it's kind of it's like it is a therapy, but it's called Bowen Family Systems
Okay.
Therapy. And that has made a gigantic improvement. And that is there's a lot embedded in that has to do with the brain, as I'm taking a year-long class in the theory, not just doing the coaching part, but um, there's a lot about the brain in there.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and it's interesting. It sounds like you circled back to a different type of, and I don't know if Bowen would be considered therapy, but a different type of support in that arena that wasn't maybe so trauma based as the previous therapy was. Um, and it's funny that you mentioned how helpful the flotation was. I do all the time was imagining myself at the Dead Sea because it was so buoyant and just imagining what it would feel like to be in a body of water and just float and not have to hold myself up. I did that more times than I can count. And it's just so interesting to hear you say that the flotation really helped calm your nervous system too. So clearly, intuitively, I was just thinking that would feel good. So,
Yeah.
um, Well, so what would you share with others that are on this journey? Anything that you found helpful, didn't find helpful? As we both know, the rewiring process is so confusing. It's oftentimes hard to know which end is up. And I think it's so helpful to get messages from people that have been through it and get a little guidance. So anything that you would share?
Well, mainly to keep going and take the classes because the classes are good because it's every single week. And if I wasn't doing anything, if I wasn't doing much on my own, at least I went to the class. And I would it and this is another thing that's true. I would feel better. I'd be crabby. I was like, I gotta go to this
Okay,
stupid
you can say it.
class, and it's still going on. And what? Here's the victim. Why is it taking so long? Um, and then I'd take the class, and I'd be happy to see the people, and I'd feel better afterwards. So yeah, really, really getting the mirror and brains that rewire together are good and all that. And the thing about however you're learning the brain retraining, believe what you're reading, even though it might sound far-fetched or that's not going to work for me or whatever. And I had to dig deep for this, and I'm glad that I did, but dig deep for patience and compassion. I mean, I just kept mining that. Like, where can I find that? Where can I find that? Um, the other thing is, I was really worried when I started, and this went on for a while, about being old. So, um, when my perfect storm happened, I was in my 50s, and I didn't start retraining for 9 years.
Mhm.
And I just always was worried that I was too old. And then while it was going on, I'm just getting older and I'm getting older and I'm laying on the bed all the time. And you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to be active and, more blah, 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 because uh, now I'm going to be 70 in a couple months. And I feel like I'm pretty much where I would have been anyway, even if I hadn't laid in the bed for almost 10 or 11 years. And I mean, I'm actually better than I've ever been in my life in some ways. So just, if you're one of the older retrainers, to try to put that aside. I guess that's limbic. That's where you tell limbic to go have some tea. Um, yeah, I mean, now I feel really grateful that not so much that I had a limbic problem, but sort of, because the more people that know what limbic system impairment is, the better, because it's, what did I write here? I just feel for myself. I feel for anybody that has it because it's so scary and so confusing and it's hard to find help and your brain isn't working and you know, how do you find the help?
Yeah.
Um, Another thing that really helped me was and I started doing this early on, is looking back, like let's say 6 months in, at that 6 month part where you're supposed to be healed up. But at the 6 month place, looking back to 6 months before where I was and comparing it and going, okay, well, I'm not, 100%, but I'm certainly better than I was 6 months ago. And I did that the whole time. I still do it now. I go, hey, I'm even better than I was 6 months ago or a year ago. Or I would look back in stuff that I wrote and so I could compare. It's like, oh, I don't have that, I don't have that list anymore. So that really helped. And
Yeah.
the other thing that helped me personally was I moved to a new place and I got to spend time with a little kid. And because it was COVID, I was his only playmate. So I spent a lot of time with him, and that really helped my brain, just hanging out with him, walking around, looking at nature. With he was 7, so it was
Um,
really that helped a lot.
yeah, and I jotted a few things down while you were talking because there's so many things that I want to circle back to. So I wasn't being rude. I was just like, oh, I need to make some notes here because there's a lot of things that you mentioned. One, what a blessing to be able to hang out with a 7-year-old because that's such a great age for wanting to explore, wanting to play, being curious. All of those things are so helpful when we're trying to reset that sense of safety within our brain and nervous system. So lovely to have kind of a little bit of a teammate to do that with. Um, what a
Um,
beautiful silver lining that came out of COVID for you. That's really lovely. Um, so a couple things I wanted to tap into. One, you mentioned really working on believing that this would work for you. And it's funny because this is a conversation that came up in one of my classes just this past week about how we all think that I'm going to be the one person that this doesn't work for, that somehow I'm special in some bad way, that this doesn't work for me. But we don't see all the beautiful ways that we're special and wonderful. But that's the way that we think we're special, is that this won't work for us. So I'm glad that you put words to that because I think everyone thinks that they're the one person that this won't work for instead of remembering my brain and nervous system is the same as yours, is the same as everyone else's. It's the same brain and nervous system that responds to the same rules of neuroplasticity. So I just appreciate you mentioning a couple other things too. Um, so the other thing that, well, a couple things. One, you mentioned compassion and patience. Um, And I think those are so important to bring in because one, when we're trying to heal, of course, we all want to feel better yesterday. So it's hard to have patience. And two, the compassion piece, I think is so important because for so many of us, we have pushed through and pushed our systems so hard and too hard for too long. And that tends to spill over into the rewiring process instead of going actually soft and gentle is what I need right now. And soft and gentle typically doesn't come unless there's compassion there. So I really appreciate that you kind of put words to really working on the compassion and the patience with yourself and the process. Um, I also love what you said about age. Thank you. I find that anyone who's over the age of 20 thinks that I'm too old. I this has been going on too long. I'm not 22 anymore and this won't work. So thank you for just speaking to that because, it's powerful to hear someone else's experience and say, hey, I wasn't 20 and this still worked. And then the one other thing that I jotted a note down about was really, really smart to kind of every 6 months go, all right, let's just take a look. Because typically what happens is people try and see progress every single day. You're often not going to see it every single day. As you and I both all know all too well, every single day or day to day, things are too messy and you can't tell what's happening from one day to the next. But typically, what happens is if you look back 6 months, exactly like you said, oh, I'm not perfect and I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm better than I was 6 months ago. And I think that's a much smarter approach than going, am I better than I was yesterday? Because often the answer is, I have no clue, or no, I'm not, because it doesn't work like that. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight some of those things because all of those things really stood out for me as super helpful for people to hear.
And one other thing about that is one of the reasons, and this is probably common, but we all have I think, something or a couple things that are the main thing that we're kind of tracking. And the main thing that I was tracking, or that I was uh, basing my success on, wasn't changing. And
Mm,
that was the movement stuff, the fatigue and the movement part, and it just wasn't changing. And so if I hadn't been going back and being able to check all these other things, I just wouldn't be what I wouldn't have been registering them, because I was so focused on the other thing. And that's what and that is what kept me kind of so angry. It's like,
mm.
couldn't go.
I think you are absolutely correct that most people, we have one or two things, maybe three things, that those are the main things that we're tracking. And those are the things that we really want to see a change in and we really want to see a shift in. And if we get so overly focused on that, we typically miss all of these other things that are showing us that actually things are changing and improving. So again, I really appreciate you putting words to that because that's something I see all the time. I'll start a coaching call with someone and I'll say, okay, any positives you'd like to share? No, nothing's changing. Okay, all right, well, let's talk. And then by the time we're done with 50 minutes, there's been, five or six or maybe 10 things that have shifted in other areas, just not that one big thing that their brain is so focused on. So again, I think that's really helpful for people to hear because that's another rabbit hole that I think all of us go down at some point. Go ahead, sorry.
Well, and then that's the other, and I still work on this one, is celebrating the small changes, because I
Mm-hmm.
want a big change.
Yeah.
So, so what about this other little thing that happened?
100% instead of remembering that the small adds up over time into big stuff. One of the other things I wanted to ask was what helped you navigate ebbs and the doubt that naturally arises when ebbs come up?
Yeah. Well, you know, the one big one was after you did the interview with, was her name Brittany or Brianna?
Yeah, Brianna.
Yeah, and she talked about that the ebbs were part of something, about the ebbs were part of the healing or something, or they needed to happen, or
Mhm.
and once I heard that, then that's how I navigated. Like when it would happen, I would go, oh,
Oh,
yeah, that I would go, oh, that's part of it. That's I'm just going to embrace that. I think that's how she said it. And I'm just going to go with it. And that's just as important as the, when a symptom or an it goes away.
mhm. Yeah.
Um, but one thing that really helped me was to get in the car and go for a drive when I was having,
Mm,
or get in my car and go visit friends. So I would just take off and go stay for a little while with some friends. Just that
mhm.
change, I think, really helped my limbic system pop up.
Yeah. Yeah. And just change the pattern and get out of the same old, same old. Yeah. Yeah. And I think what Brianna shared was something along the lines of this isn't happening to me, it's happening for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
that was
starting
a
to,
great way
yeah,
to.
well, I think it's just so brilliant because it's starting to see ebbs as part of the healing process, not something that's holding you back or keeping you from healing because they are part of the healing process. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, the way that she said it just really clicked for me. Um, and just all the little day-to-day things that I can't even remember all the things that I did. And I would let myself lay down. I would let myself sleep instead of being like going and laying down and going, you shouldn't be doing this. Or, you're sleeping. There was like so much judgment. You're sleeping too much. And instead, I would just be, it's just part of it. Like being in the retraining, the more time went on, even though it was like I said, how it was, for 4 years, I was in a different river. I was navigating that river differently than I had navigated before.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate too that you kind of talked about allowing yourself to lie down and rest, because I think one, many of us have a pretty wonky relationship with rest. And then some of the messaging in the brain retraining world can be, you shouldn't rest, you shouldn't lie down. That's just a pattern you should interrupt. Instead of saying, okay, well, let's look at how you're engaging with rest. Let's look at how you're engaging with lying down. Are you doing it in a healthy, supportive way, or are you doing it in a limbic way? Um, because I would offer that a lot of times that not allowing yourself to lie down and rest just totally feeds into patterns of pushing through that so many of us are trying to break and change. And it's just reinforcing the same thing that we've been doing for years that got us here in the first place. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Um, so you can edit this next part out, but I've been dying to tell somebody this story that knows what DNRS is, or the limbic system. So kind of early on, yeah, it was like maybe a year in. This one time, I took myself on a little camping trip to this place that was just, it was up in the mountains, and this was a one-time chance because these people were selling their property, and it used to be a, a summer camp, but they weren't doing that anymore, and they had this little like hip camp Airbnb thing where it was like one camping space next to this pond on their 2,500 acres. Okay, so I'm like, I'm going there. So I went there, and I slept outside under the stars and stuff, and it was really great. But I got up the second day, and the sun was warm, and it should have been really good. And I just felt like crap. And I was like, I'm supposed to be feeling good. And I was like staggering around the campsite, sort of just, oh, and I had my sleeping pad and everything out, and I just walked over to it, and I just fell on my stomach and felt the sun on my back and felt like crap. And I just started laughing so hard at myself. It was like the funniest thing ever. Anyway, that's all I did. That's it. That's what I did. And I think back on that because I remember how I was staggering
Mm.
because I felt that way. I felt drunk and sick, and I was in the most perfect place. I was in this sort of nirvana place. So that was my story. And we don't have to put that in there, but
Keep it in, because what I hear is one, the very normal, natural disappointment that would come from, I've made plans, I've spent money, I've made the effort to go to this special place, and I feel like crap. And I'm not able to enjoy what should be a very lovely experience, right? So there's part of that is the limbic system, but part of that is called just being a normal human being and going, well, shoot, this isn't what I had expected. And there's some very reasonable frustration and disappointment that's coming up. Um, what I appreciate, though, when you talk about kind of flopping down on your sleeping pad, is feeling the sun on your back. So for me, there's still an element of yes, I'm lying down. It's probably, again, a lot of frustration and probably a lot of pops going on when you're doing that, but you're also still connected to your environment and feeling the warmth of the sun on your back, which in the world of the nervous system is very soothing because the nervous system likes that connection with our environment. So even though you probably didn't know it at the time, there were still some things that were sending a message of safety to your nervous system, even just by feeling the sun on your back and being able to still be in contact and in connection with your environment. But yeah, I mean, I think everyone that's done retraining has had experiences like that, where you just kind of go, oh, forget this, I give up. I think that's super, super relatable. We've all been there for sure.
I give up.
Yeah, exactly. And that for me also is so key to it too, because I gave up a gazillion times. I did. And I think everyone that is still rewiring and still in the process of trying to heal thinks that everyone that did rewire did it perfectly. Most people I've talked to gave up time and time again and then just kind of went, okay, get up, start doing it again. And so I think there's value in hearing someone say, oh, yeah, I flopped flat on my sleeping pad and I just gave up. And then at some point I started doing it again. So there, for me, there's value in sharing that and in sharing I wasn't perfect in this process because nobody is. Right. It's laughable to even think about it. It's just like not even
Well,
close.
it's also like, well, what are you going to do? Just lay on the sleeping pad for the rest of your life? No. I had to get up and go on with my day. And it's the same with the retraining. It's like, well, what are you going to do? Just where are you going to go? There's nowhere to go.
That's what I always say kept me going. I didn't have a plan B. So it was, all right, well, you might as well go back to that, even though you're frustrated and you're really not feeling good about it. What else are you going to do? Go back to it. So I think there's tons of value in sharing stories like that that aren't just, oh, I did this perfectly and I used my tools and I was a perfect brain retrainer, because none of us are, not even close. So I appreciate the honesty. I really do. Um, well, the one last thing I wanted to ask you is that were there things that shifted with this work that you were surprised by or didn't expect to shift with doing retraining?
Yeah. Okay. So, and to me, this is funny because uh, I started picking my clothes up off the floor.
Oh,
I mean, it
mhm,
sounds ridiculous, but yeah, I'm a lot tidier, and it wasn't something I ever aspired to be. I make
mm,
my bed, I pick up my clothes, I do the dishes more regularly, and I think that's probably the most unexpected. Other than the thing about feeling better than I really ever have, I didn't. I didn't think that depression, I mean, it's kind of a duh now, but I didn't really think um, that I was going to get undepressed.
mm,
And I did. I mean, I do. I still have depression. I'm depressed a little bit sometimes, but it's not like before where it was all the time.
right.
And I also realized that even the times in my past where I felt good, where I would have said I felt good or that was a really good time in my life, that was usually some highly adrenalated period of time.
Mm, yeah,
It just didn't tip over into anything.
right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, two things. One, I think it's super helpful to talk about depression lifting, even though that was something that you didn't think was going to change, because just with the nature of depression, that can be one of those symptoms or diagnoses that people really think, well, I'm different, I'm special, this can't change, this can't go away. So I really appreciate you speaking to that. And for me, it makes total sense about your external environment shifting. Um, Often our external environment is a completely unconscious reflection of our internal environment. And so many times people have said, and I experienced this too, where I just started picking up more. or, the piles started to decrease. And it wasn't that I was forcing myself, it was just as I was more regulated internally, I just naturally wanted my external environment to kind of be more in alignment with that, which is cool because usually in the past, most of us have tried to force ourselves to change that or beat ourselves up about it. And then it just starts to naturally shift as we get more regulated, which is super cool.
It is. It's it's like the house cleaner came, unexpectedly.
Right. Well, Suzy, so good being with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. You mentioned a few moments ago how helpful something that Brianna shared in her video was. I have no doubt that things that you shared today will have the same impact on other people. So thank you for being generous with your experience, with your time, so that you can help other people heal just like Brianna helped you. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And if anything helps anybody, that's really great.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Suzy.
Okay.